Yes, I am from the Netherlands. I studied in Holland and felt that the academic level was great, but missed a lot of the theory that I think is really, good for architects to have. So I came to Columbia to study and forgot to leave.
So that's interesting. So you were in the Netherlands and you grew up there, right?
Mhm.
And you were there all the way through undergrad. Is that correct?
We don't have undergrad. So
It's
we,
different.
we do high school and then we do university. So
Hmm.
yeah, I basically just did that, right? And then realized that with the missing component, I could do a postgraduate at Columbia University, or at least I came to the US to check out schools and then decided on Columbia. Did a postgraduate. So I have an MSD and an AAD from Columbia.
About growing up, though, was it clear that architecture was going to be the future of your life?
Kind of was, like we had a very mobile family. We moved, I think in the 17 years I lived with my parents, we moved 15 times. So
Wow.
it
Whoa.
was always kind of like either looking for a new house or building a house or things like that. And that made me decide that, it probably was a good idea to um, study architecture, but I actually started in sculpture. So it wasn't a direct choice.
Sculpture.
Yeah, I did sculpture before architecture.
What kind of sculpture?
Freestanding sculpture, so big urban sculpture.
Oh. Well, that's
Yeah.
pretty close to architecture. There's some parallels for sure. Parallels for sure.
Totally. Yeah, no, very close. And also, I think it's partially why I've always been digital because I'm much more of a 3D thinker than a flat thinker, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I, even when I was graduating in Holland, which was 1990, I already realized that computers were there. You could design 3D. So I had the tiniest wireframe kind of animation already, like a tiny animation,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and simple line drawings, but made in the computer. So yeah, it was an early start.
So, what were some of the differences that you? I mean, I'm kind of interested also because your statement that you realized when you were in the Netherlands that you would come to the States to gain this other part of your education. That's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty uh, that's a pretty serious observation to have. When did that become clear to you? I mean, how did that work?
Actually, sort of, I was graduating. I had found in Holland the one really great philosopher we had, Wim Nijenhuis, at least a philosopher who was connected to architects. And I used to visit him in Delft, where he was living. I lived in Rotterdam. And I would bother him with questions and ask him for readings. And it really helped me a lot to
Hmm.
to kind of meet with him and to get his input in my thesis, let's say. And that also kind of inspired me. But then also I had girlfriends who studied in the AA in London, so I was very often there. And initially I thought that I would study there, but you probably don't remember, but like in 1990 is when the head of the AA passed away, Elvin Biarski, and he was incredibly important for that place. So I think it was clear that it would be a bit chaotic with him passing away. And I decided to, and then I heard about Colombia and SCI-Arc. And
Hmm.
so I went to the US to figure that out and decided to do that.
Go ahead.
Was it the first time that you went to the US when you went to school, or did you travel there before?
That's a good question. I actually studied in Chicago when I was still doing sculpture
Okay.
um, for like 5 months, a spring semester. And then I also, after that, would come back because, I love the US and the scale of the US is fascinating if you come from a tiny country like Holland. So I used to drive, left to right, up and down through the country. Yeah.
I'm also wondering, I can't imagine, were there a lot of women studying architecture at that time? I mean, at the AA and at your school and things like this?
Now, my school was 3 women from the 500 students, I think.
What?
Whoa. What was that like?
Wow.
Yeah, and very few female role models, right? Actually, Francine Huben is a Dutch architect. She's currently designing the public library. And she gave me a tour the other day of the public library. And I said to her, you don't remember, but you were actually giving a talk in my architecture school. And you were really like one of the few female role models we had. And so that was kind of a weird thing. I never thought about it, I have to admit. You know, I grew up in a family with boys. So for me, more guys was fine. You know, like it just never thought about it. So no, I can't say that I was marked by it or something. I think the one who was marked by it was my boyfriend. If we went on school trips, the poor guy would put me in a bus of old, you know, men. And he would have to say goodbye, and that was it. He was amused by the whole thing. But for me, it was fine. I didn't care.
So then you came to the States for Columbia, right? And you had a pretty good sense of a reason for it and everything like this. And you had experienced the United States beforehand, but was there kind of a culture shock moving to the city, to New York?
No, I'd been in New York before, twice. Actually, I had decided to move to New York on a school trip with architecture school, and I was trying to buy a hat on Prince Street. And they didn't have my size. And then the girl said really sweet, like, you know, I can make one for you. Come pick it up next week. And I was like, I'm ready next week. So that's when I decided right there and then that I was moving. And it's also where I lived when I moved here. Like I lived for 10 years right on that corner of Prince and Mercer.
Oh,
so did you get that hat at the end?
Did you get the hat?
Did you get that hat at the end? Were you able to go back?
I never found the hat. No, it's terrible.
That's a fantastic cross street to be at.
Yeah, it's still my favorite neighborhood. I think people say it's such a shopping mall, but really in the week it's very, very quiet. It's like a little village in the middle of Manhattan. I always loved living there. It's very, very inspirational. There's all this design around you, and yeah, it's great.
You're at Columbia, right? And at that time, it was Shumi was the head?
Yeah, Shumi was the head, and it was a group of fantastic young professors like Stan Allen, what's the other one? Goodness. I have another name in my head, but anyway, so a whole group. I'll think of his name later. A great group of young professors that were super inspirational, and I really loved the 3 semesters I did there. It's interesting because, you know, once you've already graduated, I didn't think I already had a master's, which was kind of funny. So I didn't feel that I had to behave, I guess. And so I just really experimented. I used it. I was fearless. I did whatever I wanted to try out. I probably tortured my professors and had an absolutely great time. I met Kipnis and loved working with Stan and, you know, other people. And yeah, it was an amazing time.
That had a large part to do with the fact that you felt because you already had a master's, you had nothing. There's no, I think some people put constraints on themselves, or they feel like they have to prove this or that, or they have to satisfy maybe even other people that are there. Whereas for you, you had more freedom. Yeah.
And I guess if you do, everyone who does a postgraduate really should feel like that because, you know, you have a degree already. And if anything, this is the chance. And this is still how I look at it also as the chair, you know, at Penn. Really that the postgraduate, the MSD programs are for people to find themselves and to think how, if they would run their own company, how would that be, you know, and what could you learn to help you get there.
Right. And I definitely want to hear more about the programs. But at Columbia, at what point did you realize that you weren't going to be going back to your home country and that you were going to be staying here on the East Coast?
What was funny is by coincidence, my last professors were Peter Fowl and Wes Jones, and they were looking at something that they heard Peter Eisman was working on, which was kind of smooth forms, like things like a weak form, I think Peter called it. But I translated it by looking at Deleuze and Guattari. This was exactly what I was interested in, of course. The smooth and the striated, and their whole book. What is it called? 1,000 Plateaus. And so I did my thesis on that, and then Peter Eisman was in my last review, and I had written a little, I guess, thesis argument for my project, and also looked at Lyotard, and Peter was, I don't know about that part about Lyotard. Could you give me that text? I want to check it for you. And I was like, sure, if I can have an interview.
Well done.
Yeah, that was on a Wednesday, I think. And the next Monday, I was in his office with my interview and my little text. And I worked for Peter for 3 years. So that was great. Yeah.
We've actually had Wes Jones on the show. This was before COVID, so we got to do it in person. He's a pretty intense human being.
Yeah, he was even then also extremely intense. What was a funny story is, as a foreigner, my English was even worse than it is now. And I remember they said something about my work that it was bitchin'. And I thought they meant bitchy. So I was very insulted and thought this was not cool to talk to a woman like that. And
right.
So didn't speak to them most of the semester. And then my good friend Carol, who now works for Rem Koolhaas, at some point was talking to me, and I said to her, do they have funny remarks to you too? And she's completely confused. She doesn't know what I'm talking about. And I said, well, they said the word was bitchy. And she starts laughing, and she's from LA, so she knew that word. Then it seems to be a Californian term. She says, no, Winka, that's bitchin'. That means cool.
Yeah, you probably don't hear that word very often in architectural reviews. Bitchin', rad, boss, but maybe if it's coming from Wes.
Yeah, no, I have no idea what he's talking about. So, yeah, obviously. So, yeah, that was a very funny story. I told Wes the other day that story. I was like, you must have thought I was a quiet student.
Oh.
So, yeah, funny.
You taught at Columbia for a period of time?
Yeah, I taught, I actually, at some point after 3 years, I took leave of absence from Peter because I had an offer for an exhibit, and there was a competition I wanted to do. And I had arranged with him I would do it for 2 months, I think. And then in that time, I got a project, and I did the exhibition, the competition, but I got a project. So I decided to start my own office, which was 94. And then in 94, I started also teaching with Ben van Berkel at Columbia.
Oh.
Sort of as his TA, I guess, or co-teaching, because he didn't show up the first month. But so we did that. And then after that, I taught for 8 years, 1 semester at Penn and 1 semester at Columbia.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that you're talking about, they're really serious people. And I'm kind of curious, a lot of them teach, so a lot of people are exposed to them, but, you've continually, it seems like, had good relations and learned a lot, I presume, from these folks. Yeah. How did that happen? Because I feel for a lot of younger generation, they have certain names in mind, and they would love to go study under them, then work for them, and then collaborate and teach with them. How did that happen for you?
It's an interesting question. I think, so my thesis in Holland, no, but not my thesis. The project I did before my thesis was for the NAI, the Netherlands Architecture Institute, was kind of a competition then, and our professors gave it to us. And so I did a proposal, and that proposal more or less was later, in a similar way, for some weird reason, presented by Rem 2 years later. So somehow I got to know Rem through my professor. I think my professor might have shown him my proposal or something. I don't know what happened exactly there. Anyway, long story short, I got to know Rem. I applied in Rem's office, got a job offer, realized that maybe I didn't want to do that, so said no. And then Rem is not a very, resentful person. So we kind of became friends. And then when I wanted to go to the US, he actually, and people in his office wrote a recommendation to Stephen Hall. So I worked with Stephen for maybe, I don't know, for a competition, half a year maybe. And then when I was down there, I thought, I should really talk to Chumi about school. So met with Chumi. This was September. I started with Steve, and around Christmas, I thought, I have to start in school, in June, whatever, May. And started talking to Chumi. And Chumi asked me, what are you doing? And I was like, I just finished the competition with Steven. And he's like, what are you doing now then? I was like, well, I'm resting, it was tough. And he's like,
what
about Monday? You could start in my office.
Oh my gosh.
So then I started on the Tokyo train station competition in Chumi's office, and did that for the spring, and then started Columbia. So, I rolled through these things. And then I was lucky that I had Peter in my final review, and then I worked for Peter. So, yeah, I did a whole scan. But I think, maybe because I never tried to actually work for them, it was a little easier for them. I just came as like, I'll work for you, just do a competition. I didn't want to, it wasn't like, you have to hire me for the rest of your lives.
Right.
So right. I think for them it was easier. I was just a tourist, sort of a tourist in architecture also.
Interesting. I mean, I could kind of understand that. I mean, I've wondered sometimes for these really big name architects, they get thousands of people applying, and there's definitely got to be a lot who, as you said, are diehard, almost fanboys. I must work here kind of thing. And it's got to make it weird.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. I think salary-wise also, because if you give this much to architecture, they often obviously have financial pressure, and I didn't, because I had a grant from Holland. So, I was literally just interested in helping them and learning that from them. And I saw it as part of school, and, I had no financial problems. So I just came and really worked really hard and had fun. And it was funny because I was super pretentious. I also learned, because the other day I was in, Chumi gave a little drink, before COVID, for architects and for friends and architects. And he said to me, like, I just did my archive. I found the drawings you were working on for the Kyoto train station. You want to see them? And I was like, oh, how nice. So I met him, and we went through his archive, which is absolutely amazing. And he pulled out the Kyoto thing, and there were my little drawings. And I had signed them. I signed my drawings. And I thought, wow. I said to him, Jesus, I was really pretentious, wasn't I? Was I terrible to work with? And he's like, I wasn't so bad. I couldn't believe that I did that. I don't even do that now,
Yeah. That is a young designer thing. To sign my drawings. This will be worth a lot of money someday.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, lots of people. I just wanted to make clear I did something.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Not to talk too much about all these other folks, but I'm curious, like, were there specific things that you learned from each of these people as you move through? Because you've gotten exposed to not only a good number of architects, but a good number of great architects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You learn so much, like you learn how they run their office, what it is to make a team, what it is to be part of a team, to understand like when to put your will through and when to follow someone else, and, how to be a good participant in a team, like how much do you give, how much do you support others? It's not that easy, actually, it's like quite a balance. And I also learned, for example, in Stephen Hall, I was very shy and I didn't dare to talk to Stephen. So Stephen really never knew what I was doing, and I guess that didn't really work for me. So then the next time I realized, I guess what I did was I signed my drawings, and I made a point of like explaining that I worked really hard and I loved it. And that worked better, so I learned that. And then Peter is like, his commando training in architecture, right? I mean, that is really hardcore. So, but I loved working for Peter. You know, I think so many people say like, oh, whatever. When I told friends I was going to work for Peter, they're like, really? And I did love it. We had a great group of people working there. You know, Peter is tough, but it's really always about architecture. I never felt it was personal or, you know, and I'm not a crybaby, you know, having studied with so many guys. It was definitely, I was pretty sturdy. And I just loved it. I loved the whole thing. I loved the fact that Peter would give you responsibility to do things and trust you. And, you know, it was just, yeah, not always easy, don't get me wrong, but like, it was also like a most amazing time, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm really happy I worked for all of them, really.
Wait, why?
They're very different things from everyone.
Why were people surprised you would want to go to work at Eisenman's office?
Oh no, Peter was like, because Peter had just had a court case.
Oh.
His office had sued him because he wasn't paying them or something, or not paying them right, or I don't know, something. I don't quite know. I wasn't part of it. So, and people just felt like, you know, that wasn't good. I didn't know. I mean, I'd never been paid, so I was actually paid by Peter. So it was fine. But I don't know. Actually, I really don't know. I still think Peter is a fabulous person, and I'm super grateful. I actually thought I spoke to him the other day, and I said to him, you know, he was really generous. Like for the interns in the summer, what he would do is like if he was working on a text, he would discuss it with us and, you know, buy one of those super long sandwiches, you know, they're whatever, 2-meter long sandwiches. And he would explain to us what he was writing about and then would ask us to critique it and discuss it with him. And I thought that was like, you know, I mean, don't forget why I came to the US, right? This was for me unbelievable. I was happy as a clam. So yeah, for me, that was, I only cared about that. You know, I really wanted to know more about theory and how it was to write and what that meant for architecture. And I was working with physicists that I knew on the projects for Peter and, wow, you know, would figure things out in Mathematica and then translate it to architecture. And yeah, I loved the whole thing.
That sounds like really groovy times. Dad, how old were you during this period?
It's like come out of school, mid-20s, sort of.
And so you started your practice, you said, in like
pretty early.
Pretty early, right?
Very early, yeah. I was not very good in working for people.
Well, you were not so bad, as some would say, right?
No, I just. I realized that I probably was better at running an office, but you know, that was also really hard. I mean, I had to learn a lot because I'd only worked for pretty much all the architects that are not known to be super nice to their staff. So I had learned that way. So I had to really unlearn a lot in the beginning of my practice and listen to the people who worked for me. And I was like, why are you upset? And I was like, well, you're really like really strong and not nice. And I was like, oh, Jesus. Okay. What did I say? And try and understand it. So I think, I had to just unlearn a lot and then just start my own way, how I felt an office should be. And it took a while. I think I'm a little better now, you know. It's not easy. It's a very stressful profession, you know. So, and the one thing you have to learn is not to put that stress on the people who work for you, you know, like to really absorb it yourself and try not to communicate it in the wrong way, which is always difficult, you know. It's not easy. But I think, I started early, and I had one rule for myself that I always thought, like, what do I really want to make? You know, like what is it that I really want to make? And I think that's a very important question, you know, like not I never thought, how do I make money? Because I realized early on, there's only two ways to start an office. Either you take all the work you can get and you make a decent salary, or you make what you really want to make. And then you go a little bit slower, and that means that eventually, hopefully, people will choose you for what you make. And that's basically what I try to follow. So, and of course, it was very helpful as teaching, and made a bit of money there. But even teaching, I had a very strong rule: only one school at the time in a semester, and never in the summer. So I would have time for my practice. So I've always kind of balanced it very carefully and gone slow, it's 4.
Right.
But I think 4 was fine.
I mean, that's a key thing, to find that balance, because we know a lot of young professionals who have their own practice and they teach, and we fall into that category. So it's a question I'm always asking myself to make sure I don't, go too far to one side or the other. Because I think ideally for myself and a lot of people like me, I want to do both.
Absolutely. And it is super important, I think, to do both. It's a good balance between intellect and understanding how to translate that intellect or theory or whatever in practice, and then bring the practice experience back to the academic. And I think for me, people always say, how do you do all these things together? And I don't see them as all these things. I just see it as one thing. It's really important to both. And I think both inspire, and I think both sides benefit, from each other. So I always hope that I'm a better person because of it, and hopefully my students and my staff benefit from that. So I think my staff is happy if I'm gone.
How big is your office? Right now?
I always keep it small. I like to have an office somewhere between 12 and 18 people. Because, I realized early on that I didn't study business school. I didn't study management. And although I don't mind doing those things, what I really love is design. And so I decided I'm going to stay relatively small. But to be honest, you can do a lot of buildings without many people, because we don't have hierarchy in the office. Everyone has a master's degree. Or a bachelor's, of course, but everyone's graduated from architecture school. And a lot of people who do internships with us will hire later, so that they have, we help them train, and we help them educate. And then, I think with 15 people, you can do actually 4 to 5 buildings at the same time. It's really not a problem. So, and I don't want to do more than that. I think I do any more than that, I feel like I won't be able to guarantee the quality or the detailing. And I don't like standard details. That's the other problem. So every project tends to have like some sort of invention or something special. And I think that's really the fun part of it. So yeah, I like to do that.
Do you live in New York City?
Yeah. I live now. I live in Brooklyn on the water in an old factory.
Okay.
I don't live alone in the old factory. I live in a loft in the factory.
I was also wondering, what is it like there right now because of COVID?
Oh, it's kind of crazy. We came back in August. The floor in our office building we're the only one,
okay.
Which is kind of crazy. And the streets are empty, so empty. It's kind of really sad. Everything. Well, it's what is really strange, on John Street, a lot of companies left. But what is also kind of interesting is now new companies are coming. And it was a bit of a rundown street. And with all these more cheap stores going, now I see really interesting salad bars opening that have a great interior. And it's suddenly like we're in Europe or something. I have the feeling that, oh my God, we have just updated. It's kind of interesting. So it's going through a little bit of revival, I feel. Because so many old companies stayed there because it was cheap and didn't move and whatever. And then this was so brutal, I think that a lot of companies sadly went bankrupt. But the good ones stayed, and the new ones are really nice. So it's interesting now. First I was a little taken aback, it was kind of so sad. And now I'm slowly seeing some new companies moving in. So it might be okay. Maybe it is a good cleanup, of a lot of redundant companies that maybe should have moved a long time ago, or really kept the space because they were too lazy to move. But it seems like now we're getting some interesting stuff back. So it's okay. I hope we don't close down again. That would be bad for the new companies.
Have you stayed in New York City since Columbia?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Was there ever a time where you thought maybe you weren't going to stay in New York City?
No.
No hesitation with that question.
No, I knew as I said to you, I decided it before I came, and I mean, I'm not saying this is the only place on the world where you can live, but I like New York. I think it's a great city.
And so when did you start teaching at Penn?
I started teaching in 95.
Mm-hmm.
And first, I think I did first year for 2 years, and then I kind of more or less ended up straight in third year. And then in 2000, and then I taught, so I did Columbia, Penn, and then for a while I did Harvard. And that made Penn a little nervous. So in 2003, they asked me to start a second master's at Penn, and they made me the director of that, and I became a practice professor. So then I was exclusively at Penn from 2003, and then I did that for 10 years. And then in 2013, they asked me to to apply for the chair. So they had asked me 7 years before that, and I had said no. But then I thought, this could be an interesting time to do it. So I applied, and then I got it. That was a bit of a surprise. And I have to say, it's one of the funnest things I've done. It's really, apart from architecture, of course, but it's really creative. It's great to work with a team of professors. It's really group teamwork. We have fantastic people at Penn. We have the best students. And I find it super creative. And, education in essence always has to change, right? I mean, it should be on the forefront of practice. So we're always updating, innovating, changing. I think it's a really, really great thing to do. I'm almost done, though. This is my second term, so I have 3 more years.
Oh, there's terms. I don't know anything about how administrative things work at that level.
Yeah, it's like a 5-year contract, So
I see.
Just 5 years. I think after that, I might do some research for a while.
So when you apply and when you're elected to become chair, do you have to? Well, maybe for listeners also, you could describe generally like the responsibilities of the chair versus. I guess my understanding is the chair of one school is similar to the director and head of department at others.
And sometimes the dean, right? Like I've seen some dean positions that are really doing the work of the chair. And I'm saying that because we have an extremely large department. Our department is around 420 students, around 110 faculty, roughly.
That's got to be one of the biggest in the States.
Yeah, it's very large. That's only the graduate, right? The graduate department and the PhDs together. And that's roughly half of Penn Design, but it's now Weizmann School of Architecture. Mm-hmm. So it's half of Weizmann. The other half is our 4 other departments, which are landscape, historic preservation, city planning, and art. So we're big. And so, for example, Yale has less. They have a dean, but they have less students than we do.
How does your position differ from like that of a dean in the case of Penn or that of someone else?
We are responsible for curriculum, hiring and firing of professors and staff, getting the direction of the department going, making sure we advertise and publish and make sure our standing faculty grows, and that the standing faculty gets a chance to do research and have labs, and it's really everything relative to the direction and the bigger scope of the department. All the finances, everything is under the chair. Yeah. It's a huge job.
So I want to hear about your time as chair, but also I do have to ask again, like, how did you balance being a chair and having a practice?
I realized after, the first year, I don't think I slept ever. So after the first year, I realized I needed a business partner and merged with one of my friends who had a smaller business. So now I have a full partner in Archi-Tectonics, which is fabulous. So that really, really helps. It's also good for the people in the office and for our clients. So that's been a really amazingly helpful thing and made it possible that I can focus on the department and make sure, that I don't kill myself, as in too much work. Yeah, and that's really, what I had to do. It's kind of interesting. I was always scared of that, but it's turned out to be good.
And this is a simple question, but for those who don't know the geography, like how far is the commute from the city? Seriously, how does that work? Because getting out of Manhattan's not the easiest.
Well, I'm in the bottom of Manhattan, so I am in the tunnel in 7 minutes exactly. I have a fast car. And in Philly, an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, not too bad.
Totally fine. Yeah. And the train is even shorter, I think. But, of course, you have to get to the train station. But I think the train does it in an hour and 20 minutes or something.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's that, because that was curious. But when you become chair, and do you have to kind of propose like a direction for the school that is your own, so to speak, and different or upgraded or from the previous chair?
Yeah, I think every chair and every dean probably obviously has interest, right? And I was always really interested in trying to connect to a larger network, global network. So to get external experts and in the form of governments or developers or experts of R&D labs or manufacturers, and to work with the students and to help fund research labs and research and book publications and things like that. And to really make them full partners in that so that they also get a lot back. I did that very much for the postgraduate program. That's where I kind of experimented with that. And I realized also that you really had to publish every year. So I did that also with the postgraduate program. And when I became chair, I did the same thing. So I very much kept creating this network, and I made an annual book for the school called Pressing Matters. After 3 years, I realized people were using it kind of in the library and as teaching material. So I talked to a publisher, and now it's published by Oro, which is much easier. So we do the design with WSDIA. It's an office in New York. It's graphics and branding, really great office. And they've done all the Pressing Matters, all our posters, all our announcements for conferences. So I do a book a year, a conference a year, and not I organize that it happens. With a team. And then, because the one thing I learned from Harvard, I learned many things from Harvard, but I really loved how Harvard treated us as faculty. They were just amazing hosts. They were very welcoming and very warm. And I try and do the same at Penn, so that we are very open. We share knowledge. We invite people in. We try and give back as much as we can. We're trying to be super inclusive and, just really open source, not secretive or something.
Right.
And I think that's very important because, as an education, if we can help others, I think that's very, very important. I worked really hard on getting, the name out of Penn. I think my statement when I started my first talks for Penn was like that Penn was kind of like an oyster. It really beautiful pearl inside, but really rough and like hard to penetrate from the outside. And I think slowly we are more like an open oyster, at least. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and it's really about sharing knowledge, I think, and really being inclusive and saying, hey, we do these things. So we have done the ACSA at Penn. We're doing Acadia next year. We're doing our own conferences. We've done many by now. So yeah, it's great for the faculty. Also, they organize a lot of them, and it's also great for us to get other people in.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, we're just trying to be really good hosts and share what we know.
Is that perspective or way of doing things perhaps a little bit different than not just what happened, not just Penn prior to you becoming chair, but also different from a lot of schools which tend to maybe have that the oyster closed, and they try harder to be maybe not just mysterious, but also, kind of like refine their own thing and be less open? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I just think we're the best, so we don't care. It sounds so terrible, but I do think actually we have a very, very strong standpoint, and that is that we think the students should work multi-platform on any software. That we think excellence in design is incredibly important, but it has to be supported by the most innovative structures, the most advanced thinking in energy and sustainability. And the most important also is to be inclusive and have diversity. So we really build it up very, very strongly. So structures is not boring, but we have amazing people from the ETH and other engineers teaching. We integrate all the technical knowledge and for example, theoretical knowledge in design studios. So we try and break down the boundaries of the bastions of designers here and history theories there and technologies over there, which is interesting how hard that is, but even internally. But it's I think really important because if the students start their own practice or start working in architecture, there is no separation between structures and design and how you think about it theoretically, right? It's one thing. So that's I think really important. And this sounds very normal when I say it, but it's not how many people think about it. Some schools are all design, some are all business, some are all technology, and there's very few people that can say that structures are as exciting. And I mean really like rigorous, advanced geometry structures, right? Like not this is a beam and this is a column, which I think is the most boring way to think of structures. But really think of it as everything being as advanced. And that is, I think, a challenge. And that is what could make for a great architect, I think.
Oh, now I want to go to Penn.
Not too late.
No, I think what you're saying is right. And I did want to ask you, you mentioned that it is difficult sometimes to try and get these different things to have more of a communication. Why is it difficult?
Well, I think, as much as people hate the fact that things are in clusters, it's also safe to be in a cluster.
Right.
Yep.
And so you have to turn yourself inside out to try and understand the other groups, right? As a faculty also, because don't forget, faculty is amazing in their what they're teaching, and that's what their research is in, and that's what they publish, right? So that's how they become strong as a person and as a not only as a professor, but as an important academic. Mm-hmm. So if then I ask them to become the expert also, teaching in studios, or not teaching, but like advising in studios, that might make them feel like they weaken their position. And that's not meant to be. But I'm thinking that could be difficult, plus it might be distracting from what you do. So it takes effort. It takes a little bit of extra effort, and it also means more faculty has to collaborate. They have to collaborate and talk about it. So this upcoming pressing matters, we have made it a collective effort to all really write our mission statements together. So if housing works with professional practice and, for example, sustainability, like those are like a little triangle of 2 courses and a studio. They wrote the text together, which is really nice. So I think now that also helps to kind of, we always knew the links were there, but then when you actually start to write down together what the mission is, it's more interesting, right? Because now you're part of that mission. You have dedicated yourself to that mission. And I think that's made a bit of a difference. I think that we're working on this new kind of open source book that really lays out exactly how we do it. So if anyone wants to, if anyone's interested, then they can look at it. Yeah.
I'm kind of seeing that there might be some parallels between that understanding and approach and how your own career, in fact,
Yeah, true. Well, I did a very technical, my university or the school I did in Holland was very technical. And so, which at the time we were like, really, rebar, concrete, we have to calculate that. But later I was super happy because when I actually started working as a young architect and I was young, standing on site, that I actually knew about it and I knew how to calculate it, or at least know, I could check calculations, see whether I felt it was correct, or at least knew when to ask questions. That was very helpful.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's why I think it's for the students important to know, that they know when to ask questions.
Are most of the architecture school in Holland more technical than, let's say, American schools will be? Or was that the specific one you went to that was more focusing on that kind of approach?
Well, I think what we had, like how you can do here undergrad, for example, political science, and then you do 3 years master's in architecture. That's not possible in Holland.
Right.
So our education is just longer, so you have more time to stomach it and to get classes in it. Like, I think the minimum is in Holland 5 years, and I did 7, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, especially when you're a younger designer, being kind of light-footed and having knowledge of all these different things and being almost equally interested and passionate at the beginning, especially in all these different ways, is like super important. But it's hard. It's really hard to do because there's no security. There's no security in doing it that way.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. And you're right. I mean, you have to kind of be stupid.
Right.
Which I've always been. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know why I felt like that was all okay. Like if you think my first building had folded glass. I get it now and I tell you, like, what was I thinking? And, I'm just lucky that I found the right people. They were super responsible and they made it work. And, it's still standing. And I was there the other day. It's still a really good looking building. So it's nice. Yeah.
The other aspect, when you were describing Penn that seemed to stand out is you had said something like, that practice should be a part of the education, but not. But there's many different ways that can go, and it seemed like you were saying like practice, the forefront of practice, like the future of practice should be in education. Is that right?
Not so much, but there is kind of a test going on to see whether we can get our students licensed when they come out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to take a little bit of time, but that would be really interesting because I think for students in the US, I come from a country where education is more or less free, right? Like we pay $1,000 or something a year. I really feel for our students that they have to have so much debt and then they have to work in a practice 4 years to get their hours together. And then they have to spend another amount of money to do these tests endlessly. And then they're licensed. And I feel that, there should be a way that we can build that in education, because our students always work in the summer, and here you have long summers, right? It's 4 months or whatever. So that's a decent amount of experience. If we could kind of like officially count that as a practice experience while you're studying, you would be in a much better situation. And then if somehow with NAB we can figure out how that could work. And actually NAB is looking at it. So I don't think it's necessarily happening next year, but we're all looking at it because we feel that it's really important to help young architects in the US much more than we are.
Yeah, my biggest, as a person who's of the younger generation and has 2 degrees, my biggest issue is just the student debt. If that could be resolved, I'm fine. Throw more tests at me, I don't care. But the tens of thousands of dollars of debt is so brutal, and it's actually, well, this is a really specific thing. But I was talking to a fellow part-time faculty, a teacher at some other school, and they were saying that their expectations of their school is for the school to give them a full-time position soon. And I don't know the specifics of their situation. And his point was like, well, you know, the older faculty are saying, well, I was a part-time teacher for 11 years and then I became full-time. He's like, yeah, that's great, but I have a ton of loans. It's not the same thing as it was when you started teaching, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. No, you can never compare, because also the cost of living, cities have become more expensive. Yeah. It's very hard to compare, former generations with this one, and that's why I think that's why I say like you have to constantly innovate and recheck where you are, and couldn't we be doing better? I think that is also, by the way, for the role of the architect. I think in the U.S. We don't have a good standing here in the US for some reason. I don't know whether it's because the developers have so much power, but there is a cultural problem, I think, that architects are not getting the respect or whatever we need. We have a massive liability. Obviously, developers sell their buildings much better if we make better buildings. And the whole environment and whatever would be much better if we actually reduce the amount of emissions that we actually do emit with our residences, right? I mean, it's a huge percentage of over pollution quota. So I think it's only plus, but I think, and this is maybe partially us, right? So I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately, like how can we change the status of the architects in the country, and how would you do that, and what would you organize, or how would could we collaborate with the AIA, or what do we do? No, and I think partially it's also that registration issue. If you solve that, it's very different. If you're registered, you come out of school, sure, you had to pay a little, but or a lot, but if you're registered, you could actually start on a much different salary scale also. So I mean, I think there's different ways around it, but I think we should look at all of them.
The statement that maybe architects are not are perceived a certain way in the U.S. and that's not the same as in other countries is something we've heard quite a bit. And are there specific things to you that from your eyes you see that as being like a pattern? Is it just like the respect that you get from contractors, clients, developers, or how do you?
I don't work for developers much. I work a lot for Europeans, so.
Okay, we shall just have European clients. That's the thing.
I also do that because I don't like it. It's like, and I do think. I was actually talking to someone the other day who had a new concept for social housing. I'm more interested in that. I like to take things by the core. Really think we should have amazing architecture for everyone on every level of society. It's nonsense that it's only for wealthy people. It's just pathetic. It's not like that, right? We can design beautiful things for any budget. That is why we're so good. So use us, let us design social housing, let us design better environments for our policemen, for our school teachers, for our students. I mean, there's too many public buildings in the US that are falling apart. And there's so many architects that could improve this in seconds, right? Don't you walk into a police station and you think like, oh my God, these poor people, would I really have to work in this mess? It's like terrible. I go to a community board in an old building in New York that is gorgeous. It's like solid marble details and marble floors and whatever. And no one has cleaned it for the last 200 years. And then you look at it and you think, power wash it and it would look really amazing. And then take everything out of it and put very little back. And you'd be like in really good shape, cost nothing. It's just amazing to me that this all falls apart like this.
Yeah, and I don't know why that is, because in a lot of cases, the solution to fix some of these issues is not overly complicated, right? No. And as you said, there are actually a good number of pretty good architects out there. There's some bad ones, of course, but there's a lot of really, really decent ones. So I don't know what the disconnect is.
Actually, it's the problem that they don't dare to work with young people, right? Like, I mean, if they were smart, they would ask young architects, really hungry, who are young, hip, clever, know how to work with cheap materials and do a beautiful job. I mean, I don't know. It seems to be a taboo in this country. You have to first be published 1 million times. That's dumb, because then it's an expensive architect. You know, why would you take those people? Take the young people who are really good and hungry.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Right? Yeah, so there's a lot to do, but I think somehow we'll get there. You know, there's a lot. I think it's an interesting challenge to try and change this.
Could that be your next project after being done being chair? Could you please help all of the architects in this country?
I don't know. You know, I'm trying to figure out like how we can do it collectively, and I do brainstorm a lot with my friends who are in like more important positions in that way, to kind of see how we can do it. Yeah, the problem is I have very little time, but it's never an excuse, right?
Just one more thing to tackle. I did kind of want to talk about technology and architecture. Because my feeling of the program at Penn is that it is on the very big spectrum of education of architecture, that technology is a pretty key component within the program. Is that fair to say?
What do you define technology?
Yes.
There you go.
Well, I mean, at this point, it's kind of stupid to say using computer programs in school because everyone does it. But I feel like you guys are more on the forefront of using the latest technology.
Advanced.
To create models, to create digital models, to draw, to do whatever for architecture, as opposed to institutions which are maybe just now getting a laser cutter, if that still exists, which it probably does.
I always thought when I heard that people meant that we had a lot of structures or a lot of construction or a lot of like MEP or something. So that's what that means. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So yes. Yeah, I think, you know, you have to imagine I grew up in the late 80s with computers in Holland, graduated in 1990 with tiny little computer drawings and an animation. I came to the US, no one had computers in the offices. And then while I was at CHUMI, the first computer rolled in. When I was at Eisenman, we had the first tiny little Macs, the 2CIs. And Peter sent us to Ohio to learn Form Z, the three project architects.
Well, you were sent to Ohio to learn Form Z.
Yeah, that Form Z was just...
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was hilarious. Yeah, we were like two very tall women and a short guy. So that was very hilarious too. We were quite a few, I think, in Ohio, you know, when we came in. They were really wondering what on earth were we. So for me, you know, I find that a funny question because I've always worked in 3D. But I think at Penn, absolutely. I mean, when I became chair, I so I think the first year I had a little money left over and bought 5 MakerBots or 6 MakerBots and said to the students, I'm putting them in studio so you can work real time from your computer to this thing, and I want you to test your designs during the design, not final models. I need to see studies. Because I realized when students were in the 3D, they made so many mistakes, the models weren't right, nothing connected, they had no clue what they had. It was kind of painful to watch. So I got that, and then every year I kept doing the same thing. So now we have this massive wall of MakerBots, but I have it led by the students. It's a bottom-up system. So if they destroy them, they don't have them. So they need to maintain them themselves, and they have one person that helps them, that gives parts and that makes sure that if it gets too difficult, they get help. But that's really been great, because I think to have that real time and also be independent of the Fab Lab closing or opening has been really important. Should I open my blinds? It's getting dark, right? Yeah, I was realizing it was getting really dark. So yeah, we definitely work cross-platform. We have robots. We have the bottom-up battery of MakerBots. We have really large projects, digital printers. I got all of that. Before I started, we did have laser jets and CNCs and all that stuff we had already in the normal fabrication lab. But I started a big robotic lab that is now really great to have. But also I think, it's interesting because you're right. So when I get a robotic lab, I don't make it for a few people that want to do something special. We actually integrated it in the normal core curriculum. Mm-hmm. So it's part of the accredited part of the program. So that I think is really important, because if you don't, then that means that some students will have an amazing education with a lot of robotic knowledge, and most of them will not. And I like to think that everyone knows what it is and has dabbled into it and has had a very thorough course in it and has been working on them, so that then later, if they want to know more, they already at least know the core knowledge. And I think that's really important. That's progress in architecture. If there's no progress in architecture, then I think we're doing something wrong in education, right? Because we have to be at the forefront of practice. Right. So that's why. But now I know what technology in architecture is. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I always use that term with like very specific things in mind, but I forget that it could mean anything. It could mean agriculture.
So much better about it now. Thank you.
What do you think is the biggest thing that technology, let's call it, could bring to like the buildings that we create, to architecture in general? Is it fabrication? Is it like conceptual modeling that's very intricate that gives us the possibility to do that?
Yeah, first of all, I think design-wise, you're just better informed about what you have, and you can develop much more complex models. But also, I think architecture should be much closer to industrial design. The fact that we have to hang with 5 people from an aluminum window to open or close it. In my car, I push a button and it goes up and down. The distance has gotten too big, right? Like, it should not be normal that I cannot open a brand new aluminum window. It's just not normal. So that has always irritated me. So I think that is why I feel it's really important to understand kind of the future of detailing of architecture, the future of manufacturing of architecture, and the future of design of architecture. And I think if you think in architecture more as component-based, that potentially could be prefabricated and developed as an industrial design object, you could make much more amazing buildings that are custom designed, custom manufactured, and have way more variation in the facades than we have now, if you want, right? So I think then you could start to turn a building towards the light that it needs, or you could start to, and I don't like twisting towers, by the way, but you get my point. Yeah. So performance-driven aspects could actually become really interesting ways to design the building also. And I think it absolutely has always, for me, the first thing is design excellence. If it isn't design excellence, you already failed, right? So it's a little bit like, this is more a European argument than an American argument, but if you, in a car, if you're driving, right, the way whether you drive bad or good is not because you can change the gears. It is because you can strategize on the road and know how to negotiate the other cars and curves and other things, no? And the same, I think, with an architect. If you don't have the basic knowledge to build amazingly designed projects, then you just kind of failed. So I think design excellence for me is always the thing that I aim for first. But I say that understanding that all the other things, the base knowledge has to be there. Otherwise you cannot design well and you cannot build well. So that's why, for me, I think the integration of all that is so important. And I think for architects should be really important. We cannot allow students to go out in the world without the knowledge that they need. We need to put people out there that are confident thinkers and that are really good architects in every level so that they can survive, make money, and make the world better. It's all in your generation, right? We count on you guys. So that's really my goal, to kind of help get that together so that we all can hope for a better world, because we have to.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of pressure on us.
Yeah,
but I think, having the design excellence, as you call it, as the core base that you need is a perfect analogy. And the one about the car and driving makes sense too, because you can understand the mechanics of the car, but it doesn't mean anything unless you can execute, right?
Yeah.
And also your window analogy I thought was really great. And I mean, I imagine at some point, it's going to happen, right? Because there is this gap, and architecture's always been, I feel like it's always been slow, or in recent times has been slow to adapt to latest technologies. But
we just got to ask Elon Musk to start working
I was thinking
on
of him actually, yeah.
But
we can't depend on this one guy.
No. And he's kind of wacko.
I know.
I think, honestly, we're as good as Elon Musk if we think we are, right? Like, it's just the intention. You just have to basically put your foot down. And that is nothing. Elon Musk is no one else than being super courageous and very talented. But so are we all, right? So he is just braver than we are. And I think this is a really amazing and inspirational example. And honestly, I don't care how he wants to be on a personal level. If he is the genius he is, and he does what he does, I will always respect him. And I think, that's someone who is really putting an example for us out there, that what he does with cars, we can do with buildings, right? And we should.
Yeah, and I think that's a great comparison, the analogy to the car and the building, because like you said, there is a huge gap in the evolution of, where we started with car and where we're now, and where we started with buildings and where we're now. Things are moving so much slower. So that's very, very inspiring, I think.
I think also as a way, going back to our conversation about trying to have the general public understand what we do and respect what we do and what knowledge and value we bring to the table. I think also as specifically as a way of speaking through analogy is like super powerful. And that's the thing, you point to examples in other industries that are parallel in many ways. It's maybe perhaps easier for people to buy into and digest that, well, okay, I could have a house or a building or whatever that is more performative or whatever.
Yeah, and more fun. I think Tesla or an iPhone, it's in the end, they're beautiful, they function well, but it's really fun, right? It's fun to have your photos and your music all on one little thing, and I can call my mother. On the phone. So you know what I mean? It's like, it's fun to have that all. And I think we architects sometimes forget, like Rem Koolhaas once said this, like serious architecture is only good if it's fun. It has to be fun. And you wouldn't think that Rem would say that. And I was surprised when he said it, but I thought he was right. Like it has to have a sense of humor or irony or something that makes you want to engage with it.
So you've been teaching for good period of time, right? What are some of the changes that you've seen, broad scope, even within the student body over that period, or how the education system works, like the overall flow? What changes have you seen?
Well, you have to imagine, I'm a dinosaur, so I was the only one at Penn that had a room full of computers with Maya on it.
Wow.
In 95, I think.
Oh, wow.
96, maybe. A little later, 98. And now everyone does. It's a huge difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's huge. We didn't have a computer at home when I started. There was no home computer. So I've seen a massive change. When I bought my first computer at home, people didn't have computers at home. My friends gave me a goldfish because I was going to be really lonely. That was great. Yeah, I still remember that. The goldfish didn't live.
Oh, no.
It was right in front of me, and it looked hungry, so I kept feeding it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, God, this guy looks hungry. Let me give him a little bit more food. And then he went belly up, literally. His belly went up.
Well, yeah. Marina has killed a few goldfish too in her day, so that's, I don't know.
Well, I couldn't stand with the dirty water, so I was like, I'm gonna clean it all. It's gonna be, sparkly clean, right? They were super happy for the first half hour, and then like going really fast, and then slowing down, and no one was alive when I woke up in the morning. So I was, they were too clean for them, I guess.
It is really hard, these goldfish. I mean, I swear.
I know. Yeah. I gave up. I'm on plants now. It's a little bit easier.
Yeah, I try to. And now I have a big dog. It's much better.
I did want to ask from the perspective of students, I suppose. Do you think it's necessary for students to get a master's degree?
As opposed to just a bachelor's?
Yeah.
Yes.
No. I think a 5-year bachelor's is sometimes better than just having political science in undergrad and a 3-year master's. So it all depends. I think probably the most solid education is maybe undergrad architecture and then a full 3-year master's. It depends, like I did master's and I felt I wasn't finished. I feel if you did your bachelor's and you feel you're finished, you're finished. If you feel like you need to add, like I knew I needed to add theory, or understand how to put theory in design. Yeah, I think then maybe you do, but after a bachelor's you can do postgraduate, so you can just do your master's as postgrad.
And then here's the question actually we've gotten a few times from listeners, and maybe you could answer it, because I don't have a master's in architecture, it's in urban design. And we get a lot of questions of people asking like, I have a BArch or some other degree, right? I want to get a master's in architecture. How do I go about finding the right school? What should I look for as an individual like that? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, you're asking a chair of an architect.
Well, yeah, not to put too much pressure, but I imagine you have some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what I did. I mean, I don't know if that's the best thing, but I knew what I was looking for, right? Like I was interested in theory. So I just looked at places that had what I was looking for. And I think everyone's looking for something else. So just look for what you're looking for and then find the best place that has it. And then always have 3 options. So if you don't get admitted or you can't afford it or, there's always other reasons, right? I rejected one school because the professor I wanted to study with had just left. And these are good reasons, right? You don't really have to explain it to anyone but yourself. So I think people should just be really selfish if they look for a school and really find a school that they feel happy with, that offers what they're looking for.
Yep. No, that makes sense to me because I feel like also if you do have a BArch already, you should be able to approach it with more freedom, much similar to like kind of what you said early on, right? Because that's the fun part. You don't have to take any GEs. You can focus on what you want.
Yeah.
And then a couple quick last kind of fun questions. Do you have a favorite building?
Yeah, the Whitney. The old Whitney.
The old Whitney, okay. I was actually, yeah.
Victoria Whitney.
Do you not like
I love how it sits in the city. I love the restaurants below, the bridge you come in, the little window poking out. I just love the whole thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful sculpture.
Do you like the new Whitney?
Okay. Not loving it, no.
Yeah, well, we can maybe save this for another conversation. But I would imagine it's difficult to design something that has to follow that first Whitney.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would not be a fair challenge, right? Yeah, absolutely. Different, and plus, different times, it's not easy to make that kind of quality now.
Yeah.
That's definitely the case.
And then, so you're obviously you're still chair, but do you know what you might be tackling and what you might be doing after your time as chair?
Yeah, well, it's what I said. I like to kind of start a research group, researching what I just talked about very much, to kind of see what I can work with, maybe car companies, and really develop other components for architecture that are, not for high-end use, just really for normal, hopefully social housing or something. But I like to do a research group that is really, and I'm very R&D based, right? Like, so MIT Media Lab based.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, this has been fantastic, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, you guys have great questions. Thank you.
If you've liked this episode and you want to support the show, well, the best way you could do that is just go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. It's competitive world out there, so each review makes a difference. If you're not sure how and where to leave it, you can go to our website, and we actually have a little tutorial on how to do that. We're also on all of the social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as YouTube for all of our video interviews. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. And we have a hotline.
Hotline is 213-222-6950. Just shoot us a text, and we can then cover whatever topic you pitch on the show, if it's good, or answer a question on the show. And if you can't remember the number, just follow us on Instagram, and there's like a text us button, I think, in the profile. And easy peasy.
So what's the number?
It's 213-222-6950. Mix it up right there. Alphabets and the mathematical.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness.
All right. And thanks to you, the listener, one more time, because, I don't know, it's been a long year, and we appreciate that you're hanging out with us, and we hope that you're staying safe. Right?
All right.
Cool. We'll talk to you again next week or sooner. Bye.
Bye-bye.